component, which is phonemic awareness, we know that students with cognitive disabilities, they might need instruction in phonemic awareness that is more intensive and extends beyond what their typical peers are going to need. So it might extend into the upper elementary grades, whereas for typical students, it's probably not going to last that long and be that intensive. And that pairing the phonemes with printed letters and pictures right from the beginning for students is one way to help them learn these skills. And then just exploring the different means of responding during the activities, which I'll show you on this chart here, that Broder also presented in a different study, is that sometimes these tasks for students, they don't take a lot of extra materials, they don't take a lot of extra money, they just kind of require some creative outside of the box thinking. So I'll just go over a couple examples. The top one on the left says the segmentation of words, a very common phonemic awareness activity. And we know for students who are verbal, they can express that verbally. They have here hamburger. Well, for a student who's nonverbal, they can clap, or they can do head nods, or they can blink their eyes. So just kind of thinking about that universal design approach and how can they express their knowledge in a different way. And then the bottom, identifying letter sounds. Instead of actually verbally doing it, they can point in the word. So just being a little creative in how we assess the students. For phonics and print awareness activities, students need direct and systematic instruction in identifying words and non-words, and that can be selecting from an array of words presented in front of them. It doesn't have to be verbal if they're not able to. Actually choosing books, engaging them with making choices in what they're interested in to increase motivation, orienting books, trying to hold them the correct way, or placing them if they utilize a wheelchair, they have an AAC device, placing them in a manner that is appropriate for them, and turning the pages of books, which might require modification, whether it's harder, they're printed on cardstock, or they're laminated, things like that. And then examining the parts of books. And for phonics instruction, using picture identification and names and sounds of letters as they're being taught. So like I said, just keeping those pictures linked to each skill will really help them.
And Carly, one thing that I want to say is, because I know we'll run up on time, but it's maybe if you want to maybe jump ahead to the System 44 stuff a little bit.
Yes.
And I'm just made it an assumption that you would be interested in the System 44. Are any of you already familiar with
that?
System 44?
I do have some information on
Okay.
that. I'll jump to that. So System 44, what Kimber talked about, she talked about Read 180, and System 44 is a study is a program, a reading intervention for students with disabilities or just struggling readers in general who don't qualify for Read 180. So they might take the SPI and the SRI, but they're not placed into Read 180. So System 44 is trying to provide another intervention for students who have lower skills than the Read 180, which is kind of the main intervention used in secondary settings. And on the study that I'm on with my advisor, we have been monitoring the use of System 44 in the Madison School District all year. And we've been looking at about 12 different classrooms who are using it at the middle school and high school level, then also looking at control classrooms, so just what does typical literacy instruction for these students who are struggling look like. And 3 of the classrooms are actually utilizing this program for students with significant cognitive disabilities. And what we're finding, although this is all preliminary evidence, none of it's been analyzed yet and the study isn't concluded, but is that they do these programs that involve computer-based instruction, small group, and also teacher and then independent reading. They appear to help engage the students with significant disabilities. And from what we've seen, like I said, this is preliminary, and compared to the typical literacy instruction, the control classrooms, the students actually appear more engaged in these classrooms where the computer-based instruction is used. And while there are some limitations to how it's being used, most of these programs, I think Read 180 is the same, is actually designed for a 90-minute period, as is System 44. So teachers are having to modify the duration of it and how they structure it. And we've been interviewing teachers on some of the challenges that are presenting themselves with using this program, and most teachers like it because it provides a very concrete way to teach beginning reading skills to adolescents, which a lot of secondary teachers don't have experience doing, or they haven't been explicitly taught how to translate that into age-appropriate instruction. Mm-hmm.
So are these Madison teachers using System 44 as a Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention in RTI? Where are they putting this?
I believe it's Tier 3.
Yeah, I don't, and I would say I doubt that they're necessarily functioning as a, using it as a Tier 2 intervention. I don't know that that language is being used. I don't know if you have any scoop on that, Jen.
And not all the students in it are in special ed, just like with Read 180.
Well, that's good, because RTI kids aren't in special ed. I was just wondering where they placed this.
Right. I mean,
They had to,
I would think more at Tier 2 because it's still a group kind of mediated intervention as opposed to something,
2, 3.
but you could be a Tier 3 because they've already kind of not.
It's a
And they're very
specific
small.
program product that would rev
It's a
down.
very small group. Well, that's another challenge they're running into. It's supposed to be under 10 students, and most of the classrooms have had a hard time actually putting that into practice. Most of the classrooms are larger than that, which is one of the teachers' concerns is, I can't do this effectively with this size.
Yeah, I know Read 180 has the 90-minute block of time, but what is System 44? It's less, isn't it?
I think, no, from what I've heard, it's 90. That's what we've been told it's supposed to be. Teachers are splitting it normally into 2 days, is what I've seen how they've adapted to that. They said they do half of it one day for 45-minute periods about that, because that's what their class periods are, and then the other half the next day.
That's interesting because they're selling it as less time.
As less time?
Yeah.
The teachers we've talked to said that it's supposed to be longer, but maybe they're not able to condense it.
I talked to the rep about it. He said, you know, this Read 180 is 90 minutes of time. This requires, I think it's 75.
Okay, so maybe that's it. Maybe it's not as long. But I know the teachers are saying they have to split it across 2 periods, 2 like 45 to 50-minute periods, to fit it all in to one lesson. Any other questions about System 44? Like I said, I can just tell you what I've seen teachers adapting, kind of troubleshooting with it. And just based on our preliminary data, it does seem to be engaging even the students who aren't verbal, who are nonverbal or have very limited functional skills, which is really promising because they're getting on the computer and they're going through the lessons, and it's harder to incorporate them in the small group lessons. Most teachers that we've seen for this population have been having to do small group more one-on-one with these students. But the computer component, they're sitting there for 20 to 30 minutes at a time and actually engaging in the task presented by the computer. So that's encouraging. I think that's it for mine.
Yep. And then I had, there's 2 things. One is, obviously, we have a few minutes that if you can have questions, and this was really just a completely selfish plug because Melinda Ligo and I have been working on an IES grant proposal to work on professional development for secondary teachers who work with struggling adolescent readers. And we've been focusing right now on alternative high schools. So I know we've actually talked to some people, and I think Cecil too. But if anyone's kind of interested in talking to either of us, our email addresses are up there. The other thing I was going to say, just because of some of the questions that were asked earlier, I can also share a link to that strategy in Word that just summarizes text if people are interested in that. I thought that was kind of a nifty tool, and it's something that's in Word, like so most teachers have access to it without additional cost. But anyway, so other questions?
I'm working with a group of students through a work program that are in an alternative high school.